I've always been the type to keep my head down and work hard, whether it was in my job or in my marriage. We had a good thing going, or at least that's what I thought. My wife, Sarah, and I had been together for over a decade. I was in love with her from the first moment we met. She was beautiful, smart, and funny. We didn't have a perfect relationship. No one does, but we were a team. We got married young, had 3 kids, and settled into a life that, to be honest, felt pretty solid. But looking back, there were signs. Small ones mostly. Maybe I was blind to them because I didn't want to see them. I don't know. It's funny how you can be so wrapped up in your own world that you don't notice the cracks in the foundation until everything starts to crumble. It started with the late nights. Sarah, who used to be the first one to be home for dinner, started staying out later and later. At first, I thought it was work. She's in marketing, so I figured there were some big projects that required extra time. But then it was just more and more often. At first, I didn't say anything. I trusted her. She'd been nothing but devoted to me for years. Why would I question that? But then came the phone. She'd always been open with me about everything. But slowly, her phone habits started to change. She started locking it, putting it face down on the table when she left it around. It seemed innocent at first, but I could feel myself getting paranoid. It didn't help that she would get this weird, almost defensive look on her face if I happened to glance at it. I guess at some point, the doubt started to creep in. I couldn't pinpoint when, but there was this feeling, this knot in my stomach that wouldn't go away. I kept asking her if everything was okay, but she always brushed it off. Work's just stressful, she'd say. Kids are a handful. She was always so convincing. So I let it slide until the night everything changed. It wasn't even supposed to happen the way it did. If I had known, maybe I could have prepared myself. But I wasn't ready for what I overheard. It was Thanksgiving of all days. The house was full of family, laughter, the smell of turkey filling the air. It should have been a perfect day. I was just stepping into the kitchen to grab another drink when I overheard Sarah talking to someone on the phone. I paused. Something about the tone in her voice made me freeze. It wasn't just casual chatter. It was different. There was a kind of intimacy there that I didn't recognize, like she was speaking to someone she was afraid I'd find out about. I stood there, frozen, as I heard her say something that hit me like a ton of bricks. The kids are his. All 3 of them are his. I don't know how long I stood there. My world went silent. I couldn't even think straight. I thought I was hearing things. But no, she said it again, more clearly this time. The kids, they're not yours. They're his. She was talking about my kids, my flesh and blood. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. Everything inside me started spinning. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be real. I didn't know who she was talking to, but I didn't need to hear more. I didn't want to hear more. The truth had already been laid out, as ugly and raw as it was. The woman I had trusted for years, the mother of my children, she had been lying to me for our entire marriage. I was shaking. I wanted to confront her right then and there, but I couldn't. I needed proof. I needed something concrete that would confirm everything. I needed to know for sure that what I overheard wasn't just some twisted misunderstanding. I didn't say anything to her that night. I couldn't. But when I went to bed, I made a decision. I was going to get a DNA test. No matter what it took, I needed the truth. The DNA test results came back a week later, but by then I wasn't sure I even wanted to look at them. Part of me hoped I was wrong, hoped this was all some terrible misunderstanding. But deep down, I already knew. Thanksgiving had passed. The house felt cold and distant, even with the kids running around. Sarah acted like everything was normal, but I could barely look at her. Every time she smiled, every time she spoke, I felt a mix of rage and disbelief knotting up inside me. I wanted to scream at her. I wanted to demand answers, but I couldn't bring myself to do it yet. I needed the truth first. The final, undeniable truth. So, one night when she was out running errands, I opened the envelope. The letter inside was simple. The results clear as day. The kids weren't mine. Not one of them. I felt numb. My hands were trembling as I read the words over and over again, just to make sure I wasn't seeing things. But there it was. All 3 kids were confirmed to be someone else's. The man she'd been seeing behind my back. The one who had apparently been a part of our lives for years, while I played the fool, completely unaware. I remember sitting down on the couch, just staring at the wall. I could hear the kids playing in the next room, laughing, unaware of the storm that had just hit our lives. How could she do this? How could she lie to me like this? I was broken, but I didn't want to fall apart in front of the kids. Not yet. I don't think Sarah knew I was aware of everything yet. But when she came home that evening, the air felt heavier. I couldn't even look at her. She smiled at me, asked about my day, but I was done pretending. I needed to confront her. I needed answers. I couldn't live with this lie anymore. When she walked through the door, I could barely look at her. I couldn't fake it anymore. I couldn't pretend like everything was okay. She looked at me, that familiar smile creeping across her face, but I was too far gone by then. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice soft like everything was normal. I stood up slowly, the envelope still clenched in my hand, the DNA test results staring at me like a weight I could barely carry. "Sit down," I said. My voice sounded strange, even to me. It was calm, controlled, but underneath it, I could feel the rage bubbling up. She didn't seem to notice, or maybe she just didn't care. She sat down across from me, looking confused. "What's wrong?" Her eyes darted to the envelope in my hand. I tossed the envelope onto the table between us. "You tell me," I said. The words felt like they were choking me, but I pushed them out. "The kids, they're not mine, are they?" She froze. The color drained from her face. For a second, I thought she was going to deny it, but then her eyes flickered away. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice too high-pitched, too defensive. "Don't play dumb, Sarah," I snapped. "I know everything. I know about him. I know the kids aren't mine." I felt my pulse racing, but I couldn't stop. "How long? How long were you lying to me? How long have you been seeing him?" She opened her mouth like she was going to say something, but then closed it again. I could see the panic in her eyes, and for a moment, it almost felt like she didn't know how to respond. I didn't mean for it to happen," she finally stammered, but her voice was weak. "It just things got complicated." I could feel my anger rising, but I kept it under control. I didn't want to break down. "Not yet." "Complicated? Are you serious?" I said, leaning forward. "You've been lying to me for years, Sarah. I trusted you with everything. With our life, with our kids, and you throw it all away for some guy? You do this behind my back and then act like everything's fine? Like I wouldn't notice." She started crying, and I didn't feel an ounce of sympathy. "I'm sorry, okay? I never meant for it to get this far. It was just easier. I didn't know what to do." I shook my head, my heart breaking all over again. "Easier? What about us, Sarah? What about our family? What about me? Was I just some idiot to you? I never wanted to hurt you," she whispered. "I never wanted this." But it was too late. The damage was done. The betrayal cut too deep. "I can't do this anymore," I said quietly, standing up. "I can't look at you and pretend I don't know what you've done." She was crying now, begging me to stay, to work through it, but I couldn't. I didn't want to. Every word she said just made the hurt feel deeper. "I'm done," I said. "I'm walking away." I left without saying another word. No dramatic shouting. No big confrontation. I just walked away. I walked out of that house, and I never looked back. I don't know how I made it through the days that followed. I was a ghost in my own life. For the first time in years, I felt completely and utterly alone. The kids, they had no idea. They were too young to understand why Dad suddenly wasn't there every morning, why their world seemed to change overnight. Sarah tried to hold everything together, but I could see the cracks forming in her too. She knew. She knew what she'd done, and now she had to face the consequences. But me? I was in a daze. I don't even remember most of that time. It felt like I was moving through life on autopilot. I stayed at my brother's place for a while, then rented a small apartment. I didn't even care where I was living. I didn't care about anything. The woman I'd built my life with, the person I thought I could trust above anyone else, had shattered everything in an instant. The pain of it was so suffocating, I couldn't breathe. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, asking myself how it could have happened. How did I not see it? How did I let her deceive me for so long? And the kids, I couldn't stop thinking about them. They weren't mine. They never had been. At some point, the anger started to fade, but the heartbreak didn't. It gnawed at me, deep down in places I didn't even know existed. I wanted to confront her again, yell, scream, but I knew it wouldn't change anything. She had already made her choices, and I had to make mine. I stopped talking to Sarah for a while. I couldn't face her, and I didn't want to. Not when everything I thought I knew had turned out to be a lie. Time passed. The hurt didn't go away, but it got easier to breathe. I started focusing on myself, really focusing for the first time in years. I took up some new hobbies, started exercising, and eventually I threw myself into my work. I became more successful than I ever imagined. I started my own business, worked day and night, and slowly but surely, the pieces of my life started to fall into place. I went from being a broken man to someone entirely different. I became a version of myself I didn't even know existed, a stronger, more determined person. I wanted revenge, but not the kind you might think. I didn't want to burn her life to the ground. I didn't want drama. I just wanted to show them, all the people who had walked all over me, that I wasn't some guy to be used and discarded. I didn't know how long it had been, years maybe, but I had transformed. And by then, I was no longer just surviving. I was thriving. And then, one day, I walked back into their lives. I remember the first time I saw Sarah after everything. It was 10 years later, and it wasn't in some rundown coffee shop or some awkward meeting at a family gathering. No, this time, it was in the lobby of a high-rise building downtown. I was standing there, my hand on the elevator button, when I saw her. She was there with a man, definitely not her husband, and I could see the way she looked at him, the same way she'd once looked at me. But the difference was this: I wasn't the same man anymore. I didn't let her see the shock on my face. I didn't flinch. I smiled, but it wasn't a smile for her. I walked past her, not even acknowledging her presence. I was a billionaire now, with power, influence, and an empire. And I didn't need her anymore. I hadn't come to destroy her. I had come to show her that I had moved on, and I was better than ever. It wasn't dramatic, like I thought it might be. I didn't tear into her, didn't demand apologies or explanations. I didn't even want to. But what I saw in her eyes that day was enough. She looked lost, like she knew she'd ruined something beautiful, and now she was standing in the ruins of it, wondering where it all went wrong. I don't think she expected me to be who I was now. She probably expected a broken man, someone she could manipulate, or at least someone she could feel sorry for. But when she saw me, standing there, confident, with everything she never thought I'd achieve, her expression shifted. I saw the recognition in her eyes, the regret. But honestly, it didn't matter. I had learned to let go of the anger. She wasn't worth the effort of hating anymore. All I cared about now was me, my success, and the future I was building. After that day, Sarah tried reaching out a few times, but I never responded. The last time she called, she asked if I'd be willing to meet. I thought about it for a second. I considered all the things I could say, all the things I could do to make her understand how much she had hurt me. But instead, I deleted the message. I had nothing to prove. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. I've rebuilt my life from the ground up. I've found peace with the past and learned that revenge doesn't always come in the form of dramatic acts or payback. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply living your life better than the person who hurt you could ever imagine. As for Sarah, I don't know what happened to her. She's still with that man, or at least I assume she is. I don't care. I think about the kids sometimes, but I've come to terms with the fact that they're not mine. They were never mine, and that's something I can't change. But that doesn't mean I didn't love them. I did. I still do, in a way. I'm not the same person I was when I walked away from that marriage. I'm stronger. I'm more focused. And I'm happier. If I could give any advice to someone going through something like I did, it would be this: don't let anyone make you feel small. Don't let anyone take your power. The hardest thing you can do in moments like these is to walk away, but it's also the most empowering thing you can do. And when you do, keep moving forward, keep improving, keep proving to yourself that you are enough. Sometimes the best revenge is just living well,